episode 16 of Cup of Chi. I'm Anthony Monteith. Today with me is a special guest, Younis Fakhfakh from, where are you living now, Younis?
I live in just outside Delvin in County Westmeath.
Okay, brilliant. And Younis has been a martial artist for many years, a therapist for many, many, many years. And we have a shared interest in similar nightclubs from our youth by the looks of it. But anyway, what I'd like you to do, Younis, just introduce yourself, give a little background, your journey. Obviously, it's a big journey, so condense it down for us and let us know what you're doing now and what you're up to.
Okay, so as you say, my name's Younis. I've been doing ninjutsu since 1994. I started when I was at Birmingham University. On the back of that, I got into the Amatsu therapy, which is closely associated, same head of both systems in Japan, Dr. Masaki Hatsumi. I got into Amatsu in the year 2000, moved back to Ireland. My mum's Irish anyway, so I came back here from the UK and started studying it with Billy Doolan. He trained me up till towards the end of 2001 when I qualified. I've been practicing Amatsu ever since. In the meantime, in the martial arts world, I got into ninjutsu, then I got into things like Tai Chi. The big one for me was in 2006, I was introduced to the work of Cheng Hsin, Peter Ralston's work, and that's become my main thing now in the martial arts. Although I practice all sorts of other martial arts. I've gone to train with Muay Thai and BJJ people and all kinds of other things. But my Cheng Hsin is never far from my mind because the principles in Cheng Hsin always feed into any other martial art I do. And actually the principles of Cheng Hsin, it's like what Peter Ralston did is he took stuff like the body movement of Tai Chi. So all those kind of fundamental principles like grounding, centering, all that stuff, put it behind martial arts. What I found was I was able to take those principles and put them behind my Amatsu work so that I was getting better results in therapy as well.
Very interesting. That's super interesting. Yeah. I've noticed when I'm doing tui-na, if I go back to the principles of some of the Chinese martial artists, and I'm talking internal arts, and bring that back into tui-na, you do get, you then become not reliant on technique as such. You become reliant on form, on your actual form and structure of your own body, being able to allow to facilitate change. In terms of the Cheng Hsin, then, what was the factor that really, what was the thing with the aha moments where you said, right, this is for me, I like this, I like the way it's delivered, I like, what were the components that drew you to really focusing in on that?
Well, what drew me to it actually, before 2006, I was in a bookshop in Leeds actually in the year 2000, and I saw Peter Ralston's book, Cheng Hsin, the Principles of Effortless Power. And it was that idea of effortless power. So, I mean, in some ways it's a controversial one even to say, because a lot of people don't believe it's even possible. But the ninjutsu people always said you shouldn't be using a lot of physical strength. It's all about technique, alignment, structure, all that kind of thing. And the ninjutsu people had some stuff there, which, yeah, like some of the better practitioners of it were surprisingly light. It felt like you'd get thrown by them, and it felt like it was fresh air throwing you, or that kind of thing. But when I went to Cheng Hsin the first time, they took it to the nth degree. But what was even more impressive was that their techniques were actually more impressive, and they were actually sparring with it. So they'd put on gloves and box with you, but they'd still be using that principle. And it was, I remember having a chat with somebody. They said to me, yeah, but how can you call it effortless? Even to move your little finger, you're going to have to produce effort. And I said, that's a fair comment. I think the idea is that it takes no more effort to produce a technique than it would to move in free space. Because it's however that way that you align and center your body produces huge amounts of energy without actually having to put a lot of tension behind it. So, the technique is literally hidden in your walk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm noticing, I don't know, I mean, obviously, we've a similar kind of history in terms of going from martial arts into therapy, but I'm noticing, I don't know if you've noticed, this last 20 years in particular, there's been suddenly an uncovering of Westerners who are able to achieve, these results that we are automatically thought was only achievable by the Oriental masters. Like, I've had friends who've traveled to China and trained in China and come back totally disillusioned, with none the wiser. And then yet there's some Westerners like that have managed to work out, what those hidden factors are, including one of my own Qigong instructors who's he's basically looking at other people's work and then seeing, can he build Qigong structure into that work? So he's taking his own work and he's merging it with other systems to see, and what one of his sayings is, you need to become the Qigong animal. So when you're a Qigong animal, you should be able to slot in to any other martial art or any other discipline, because you're coming like that. It's very hard to take, say, Qigong and put it on top of rugby, or take Qigong and put it on top of hockey. Whereas if you're going in with a Qigong, I'm just using this as an example, it doesn't have to be Qigong, it could be Cheng Hsin. You're going in with that body that's already been trained. It's very easy to apply, as you say, those principles in your fighting, in your defense, in your calligraphy, in your therapy. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, the thing that was really brought home to me was that these things ultimately transcend culture. So I know a lot of this stuff comes out of Oriental culture, but at the end of the day, you've just got a human body and a human mind and so on, and it's just, and then the world at large, and it's like, how do you structure your body, your movement in relationship with the forces around you? And there's more or less clever ways of doing that, and it's fair to say that in the Far East, people had the sensitivity over the millennia to work some really interesting stuff out. But that doesn't mean that it's not available or accessible to people from other cultures, and it's very clearly is. Now, in Ralston's case, to be fair, his parents were diplomats, so he did grow up in the Far East. So he would have grown up in Singapore and then Japan, and he was thrown into martial arts from a teenager. So, like, but he was able to translate that stuff and bring it back into the West. And one of the things he told us was one of his best teachers was actually in Chinatown, San Francisco, in the late 60s. And that was, he was Chinese, but Peter talks about going to China to study. And the guy actually said to him, there's no point. All the best people came here during the Cultural Revolution. They left China.
Yeah. Yes, that's really, really interesting. Before I went to China on my first trip, one of my teachers said, why are you going there?
Yeah.
I said, what do you mean? He said, everything you need is right here, And I just thought, he's being arrogant and conceited and his ego, because he thinks, I'm going to go there and learn something more magical and bring it back and be better than him, But it took about 10 years before I realized, now I get what he's saying. He didn't really mean it's right here. He meant it's right in you. It's just it's a case of working with it and unlocking it. I had a fascination. I know you've a fascination with medieval mirth and skullduggery, but I tried to look into the medieval sort of, there's been this resurgence of Renaissance martial arts. But I lived with a guy in Sunderland in 1995 when I was studying there, and he used to make medieval armory. So we had an armory at the back of the house in the garage. An amazing guy, like, he'd do sort of stuff for films and whatever. But he used to talk about how, some of these soldiers would have their own spiritual practice in which to align themselves. And he used to say, at the end of the day, there's only so many ways you can fight, but then it's much more difficult with a suit of armor on. So there had to become, as you say, timing, alignment, stance, using space. That was the only way that you could overcome, especially when you're, but he said one of the things he found was that a lot of the historical records around armor are actually incorrect. That some of these soldiers can move a lot better and a lot faster than we give them credit for. It's just that we don't see all the designs.
That actually seems to be coming out more now, and more people are saying that. I did train briefly with a guy who did Hama, the recreation of European martial arts. Like, so on the surface of it, it looks kind of like fencing, but it's not like the Olympic fencing, because they're actually, it's much more multi-dimensional kind of fighting, and they'll sometimes use two swords. But it was interesting because those guys, to be fair to them, those guys actually spar with it. So they're actually trying it out as a live kind of, they're going back to the old manuals, 15th century kind of Italian and Spanish kind of masters, looking up their techniques and then trying to figure out how, so they're trying to recreate it and try to figure out how to apply it in a kind of live sparring kind of situation. Well, they're obviously completely kitted up and everything.
Yeah. I know a few friends who did we talked about this on text message about Systema, and a lot of those guys were saying there's a history with the Cossack nation, and that there's a deep internal martial aspect with that, and there's only a few people who have managed to achieve that. But for them, it was about mobilizing the joints and making that body just like one system, very relaxed with its movement, very fluid. And that reminds me of a few Oriental martial arts that I've experienced,
absolutely. Like, you're looking for that kind of real fluid, very integrated and fluid body. And I've known a couple of the Systema people here. A fellow called Gareth Hodgins used to teach it. He was an interesting guy because he was a Sanchu fighter as well. Like, so he had a background in Chinese martial arts. I think he came out of it. He told me he's just into Neigong now. Actually, that's really his thing. I don't think he's doing much martial anymore.
Yeah.
Although he might correct me on that, but I don't know. But as far as I know, but yeah, I went to do a bit of training with him, and the first thing struck me was I don't know, there were differences, but I was actually surprised at how many similarities there were with the Cheng Hsin. Actually, when I went to train, and I taught some Cheng Hsin to a Systema group down in Clonmel, and they just said this is just Systema by another name. That's how they read it.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be crossover. There has to be. As this guy said, the armory guy, there's only so many ways you can before it all starts to merge. In terms of then yourself, like what's your daily practice? I mean, you're I believe the only Cheng Hsin teacher, instructor in Ireland at the moment. And you're trying to grow, I presume you're trying to grow this system.
Absolutely.
So what are you up to? What are you doing? I know you've got an event coming up, so we need to talk about that and maybe leave the links below if people want to get hold of you. But what's actually going on now? What are you trying to do?
Well, at the moment, like I'm always trying to get better at martial arts in general. So I quite happily cross train. So at the moment, I'm doing a lot of training with the Muay Thai club, and I got huge fun out of that. I actually really enjoy it. I'm training with Alan Kane, actually doing the sword, and that's kind of, I see that almost, it's a nice way, the Haidong, the Korean sword style, that's a really nice way to focus the mind. I find that sword stuff kind of, I'd say almost as a meditative practice. But that's obviously stuff that's outside my own stuff, because my main thing is Cheng Hsin. So as a daily practice, I'll do Ralston's Tai Chi form. There's a Tai Chi form associated with Cheng Hsin, derived from Yang style Tai Chi. So it's from Cheng Manching, William C.C. Cheng, that kind of lineage. Practice that every day, and then we've had the lockdowns and the COVID and all that, so there wasn't much of a chance to do a whole lot. Although I was getting online students and I was teaching them some of the forms online. But what's nice now is things have opened up again, and I've got some of my one-to-one students who are coming back to me. So I just go down and teach them for a few hours. So I have people on a one-to-one. I'm not yet. I'm looking at opening up a proper club, but I'm just kind of working out exactly where to set that up at the moment.
Yeah.
But you know, if anyone ever wanted to do Cheng Hsin, I'm available, and I teach them one-to-one anyway. And in some ways, that's a better way to teach. There's advantages and disadvantages. The advantages,
sure.
the advantages is I can go much more detailed, much quicker. The disadvantages, you don't have a lot of bodies to train on.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, that's the thing. You're trading time, aren't you, for money, and it's you're limited. You can't. It's not very scalable. Whereas if you could have 10 or 20 students in one room, then it's, you know, you might not be able to get to the detail, but your scale and your reach is much further. I think. Very interesting story. Alan told me. I mean, maybe he's told you this about one of the top instructors in Haedong. Was sent from Korea to, I don't think it was Spain or some other country like that, and he was there for years, like, and couldn't get any students. And he was doing everything he was told to do, and he thought, well, you know, people should be piling in here because it's just so unique. It's a very relatively new martial art, and he just went away and he did like 10,000 cuts, you know, just straight line cuts, because he realized the problem was with him, not with the art, because you know, any Korean martial arts very heavily structured. It's like a business, you know, they have all the training manuals, all the posters. They're very good. The Koreans are very structured that way. It's a very deliverable system. But he just went away and did this like 10,000 straight cuts and cut away all his beliefs and, you know, his self-limitations and his frustration and his anger. And he said, like, within 6 months, he had like 10 students, and then it was like 20 and then 30, and it just snowball. But I used to, I don't know if you remember this area of England, but Hyndburn, which is near Blackburn.
Well, I knew Blackburn.
Yeah, so you know Bolton and Blackburn and areas like that. You would have knocked around those areas. In the 90s, like 96, 95, 96, I was running martial arts classes under my instructor, Master Robert Hedges. And we were doing Tang Sudo. Back then it was Subak-do. It was Korean karate, basically, Korean style karate, like a military style karate. And then I think I was like, I'm going to say, well, I was actually teaching before that when I was 19. We were running classes in 1991. So I was one of the youngest instructors, if not the youngest instructor in the group. And I remember on my first day, I had 60 people roll up to the class, right? And I mean, a class was like, I think it was 50 pence or maybe £1 or something. But £60 was a lot of money to make. Like, I'd work in a factory for £12, you know, a day. And so £60 was like 5 days work. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be super wealthy. And when I went to meet my teacher, he was like, okay, now we take out the expenses, we take out the flyers, we take out the rent, we take out the uniforms, we take out, and he's like, there you go, it's five quid, you know, £5, whatever. And you realize, oh, okay, now you've got to learn about business as well when you're teaching. But then I went to university, so I couldn't continue with that club. But I remember thinking to myself, God, you know, I'm going to be more successful than my teacher. But what actually happened is, after a few weeks, you went from 60 down to 10, you know, and those core 10 people were the ones that would carry the martial art, you know, that would carry it.
That's always the way it always starts out. There's always if you create a bit of a splash, there's always huge interest, and then it becomes a self-selected group, and there are people who are just really into it and other people who are just kind of just wanted to see what it was about.
Yeah, it's like a funnel, you know, in the beginning. I mean, it can go the other way, you know, where you start and you've only got a few, and then it's that those few people grow it and grow it and grow it. You're always going to get people that drop off at the end, and then new people coming in. But
yeah, well, when it grows that way, if it's the word of mouth thing and it's friends bringing their friends in, they're much more likely to stay as well.
Yeah. And so for you doing the Cheng Hsin, can you give a brief outline of how it came about? Did he create it? Is it a lineage system, or was it him sort of just saying, right, I'm going to strip away all this tradition and you know, reflect, or is it something that he's created?
Okay, well, yeah. If I ask if I was speaking to Peter, I'm pretty sure he'd say he didn't create anything. He would probably say to you that he just rediscovered old principles that have, for one reason or another, have been forgotten.
Right.
But press him a bit more, and he'd probably say to you that Cheng Hsin basically came about because he decided he would teach the things that made him skillful.
Right.
So, but on a practical level, if you go to train Cheng Hsin, you're going to learn what's called body being, and a lot of that stuff is basically the body dynamics that's mostly found in Tai Chi.
Okay.
So you're looking at 5 principles, calm mind, relaxed body, grounded, centered, unified, those kinds of principles.
Okay. From a health perspective then, because there'll be people that'll be interested in doing Tai Chi, and I know that, in the 50s in China, they really promoted Tai Chi as a health and wellness, and it's become, in some cases, I believe, quite a beautiful looking dance. But it's so much more than that. I mean, some of the real. I've trained with some really. I've never done Tai Chi, to be honest with you. It's not something I've ever done. I've had students who come to me who show me their Tai Chi, Yang style, Chen style, and I can see the benefits of it. Huge benefits, like all the benefits of a martial art with extra juice in there. And what I found was that there were some people who were very skillful, and had gotten skillful very quickly, like within 10, 12 years of practicing. And they said it was just all down to the original structure of it. So, and that the teacher was really, really key on the basics. So does Ralston do that, or what's his emphasis? Is it, is he's starting with getting your structure right? Like how does it, what's the format of the training?
Yeah, you're basically on the money there. If I look at it myself, actually, the way I tend to break it down, as I said, firstly, you're looking at how do you structure your body, and how do you structure your body in movement. That would be the first part, and then it's like, how do you structure your body in relation to another? So you're talking about a relationship that gets set up. So if you're talking martial arts, it's a relationship between 2 or more people. And how does that play out? How do you neutralize forces? What would success look like in that interaction?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's looking at what Ralston would call principles of interaction. So you're thinking stuff like very simple following. Can you follow your partner's movement?
Okay.
Can you lead your partner's movement? Can you join with and redirect your partner's movement? And those kinds of principles. And you'd be amazed at how effective that stuff is if you're playing a martial game. Because even I'd go in and be in a situation where I'm boxing somebody, and if I can really follow their movement, so it's almost like I'm studying the person I'm training with, rather than getting into reactive kind of fear and, oh no, he's going to try and hit me now kind of thing. I make a study of that person and I'm following their movement. Suddenly you become way more effective.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm saying those principles filter into any martial art.
Okay, cool. So you have an event coming up, I believe, it's in July.
Yeah, mid-July.
Have you got the dates firmed yet?
We haven't proper fastened the date yet. It's only the chap just called me about 2 or 3 days ago. A fellow called Brandon Lee, and he's one of Peter's top students.
Okay.
I was over in Texas with Peter in 2012, and that's when I would have met Brandon. He's been over here and over in the UK since, and teaches seminars himself and stuff like that. So I think he's planning on doing a bit of a tour of Europe. So he's going to be in the UK. He's going to be in Holland. I know he's going down to France as well. And he contacted me and asked if there would be interest in Ireland.
Okay.
And I just thought, great. It'd be a great opportunity to make a bit of a splash with Cheng Hsin in Ireland. The stuff is brilliant. Like, as I said to you, from the perspective of being a therapist, learning that body movement behind the application of physical therapy is amazing. But from the perspective of doing martial arts, it's just so valuable.
Okay. Very good. So what we'll do is I'll leave your contact details below when we get this all uploaded and edited, and maybe they could reach out to you, so you could maybe build a list, or have, a list of interested people who want to maybe hop onto that training. Where do you think you'll hold the training? Will it be in the center of Ireland, or will you be more toward where the population?
Yeah, I think I suspect it'll be I'd suspect it would be around Mullingar, Athlone, maybe Naas, that kind of area in the Midlands, right. I suspect. Yeah. I'm going to try and make it fairly central, but fairly accessible to anyone from anywhere in the country.
Can come, yeah.
That's kind of the idea I have in mind.
That's what I've been doing lately with the guys coming over from Switzerland and that. I mean, most people would say I'll go to Dublin, but what I'm finding is Dublin, can be a little bit of a logistical effort. Whereas if you go to the Midlands, you can draw people from Sligo and Mayo and Galway, and even people from Cork will still come up. So that'll be interesting. So what we'll do is we'll leave the details below the podcast here. We'll put some links in the description box for people to contact you, perhaps, and to see, can we build an interest in that? So is there anything else you want to say to the people that are listening or watching? Any bits of advice you can give them for self-nourishment on the Cup of Chi podcast?
Yeah, well, I mean, like we've been talking about martial arts, movement, physical therapy. The one thing I'd say to my own clients, students or whatever, is you want to keep that natural kind of integrated movement in your body all the time. Quote Moshe Feldenkrais, he'd say the quality of your movement, the quality of your health is the quality of your movement. So, and another teacher of mine used to say, if you do something every day, there isn't a day you can't do it. Actually, that was Dennis Bartram from the Amatsu used to say that. So I always encourage people to say, look, you can do things like yoga. That's brilliant. There's a meditative aspect, spiritual aspect. You can go very deep into it. But on a very simplistic level, you're getting great flexibility and strength training in the body in a very natural, integrated way. Study things like Tai Chi and movement, because they really, really do teach you. It's an economy of movement, and it's a way of moving your body so that you can do any task much more skillfully with a lot less effort and much less chance of injuring yourself. So when I teach people Tai Chi, for instance, I say, look, this comes out of the context of doing martial arts, fair enough. And if you want to do martial arts, you can take this body movement and start applying it and use it in systems of martial arts. But you could use Tai Chi to mow your lawn. And you're pushing a lawnmower now. Instead of tensing up your body and bracing up, you're grounding your body and relaxing into it. And now you're pushing this thing with a lot less effort. For an older person, for example, it's much less likely to create strain or pain anywhere, all that kind of stuff. So, I suppose I'm plugging this stuff as well here. What I'm saying is, the more you learn how to use your body in this way, the better it is for you, the more skillful you get, and the less likely you are to end up with an injury in any task, whether it's a sport, mowing lawn, or doing a martial art.
Yeah, sure. A lot of the Chinese people that I met in my travels were, retired, and they would only take up the martial arts when they got to 60 or 70 years of age because they had time to do it. Rest of the people would do it early morning before work, so 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m. As the sun is rising and it's quieter and there's less noise and pollution. But we're definitely seeing a movement towards natural body movement. Quite a few friends that have been on this podcast. One of them is still waiting to get hold of him. But Egwin was on, I think, number 4. You can check out his work as well. It's quite interesting. His conscious awareness with movement. So definitely we're going into those realms. I think that's a natural evolutionary process, though I do think when I look at people like the Kalahari Bushmen or the Tanzanian Hansa tribe, is it the Hansa tribe, and you watch the way that they move and the way that they hunt, it's just so natural. non-contrived, very relaxed. They run super relaxed on the forefoot, a nice flowing, short, fast run, and then they sit down and squat and wait and go again. And they do this amazing movement that we've lost. And I think partly, we don't live on the floor anymore, right? We don't live on the floor. We don't sleep on the floor anymore. So we're always in this upright position, not really folding the body, not really collapsing the body. Not like a baby would, a baby would just walk along and sit down and stand up as if it was nothing. And I think we have lost that capacity. I do think it affects our cardiovascular system, our joints, mobilization. And I see it in myself. I've two, I can say, knees that have been a challenge, where you can learn martial arts incorrectly, right? So, hyperextension of the knees, as an example, kicking into empty space a lot is not good for you. There's a podcast I did with Kurt Scott. He's the dragon style, Lung Yin style practitioner, and he's the same age as me, maybe a couple of years younger, but he looks fantastic. And he said, the reason is his martial arts is that you do a mixture of hard qigong and then medicine. So even though it's a hard style qigong, with a lot of striking, but a lot of the moves are kept within the body shape. So you're not trying to overextend, and that's kept his joints from degenerating and kept him strong, So he said it might not be pretty to look at, but it's extremely fast and effective and powerful. And then, after training, they would put herbs on the joints, so they're constantly rejuvenating themselves. I did try, we talked about it before we started the podcast, I did try the Bujinkan a few times, just out of interest. What I really enjoyed, actually, because it was something I was really rubbish at, was rolling. I really enjoyed the rolling. I just felt something that I really needed. And I also enjoyed the fact that I wasn't trying to strain myself with huge, enormous kicks, aerial kicks and stuff. And so I enjoyed that aspect of it. So there was definitely something really nice about being able to drop down and just roll out of the way of something. I always thought about, if I fall off a chair or if I slip, would I be able to slip and go into a roll? I actually have a student she's up in Belfast, Fiona Jennings. And Fiona trained with a chap, I can't remember his name, but she trained with him for years. He's passed on now. But she did Tai Chi with this guy for years. And I remember she was in a bad car accident where this guy came head on and she had to swerve. And she went up an embankment and rolled the car. And she broke, she like a pars defect on her, or cracked one of her vertebrae. And she was in a body brace, And we were about, a couple of weeks out from going to China. We were down in Wexford, and she'd had the body brace off and she was able to move. And somewhere along the line, we'd reorganized the tables and moved the chairs, and she went to sit down and the chair wasn't there. But it was so interesting because she's, she won't mind me saying this, she's been around the block. She's not a spring chicken, but she just literally went into a back, she felt herself fall, and she knew she was falling, and she went into a perfect back roll and stood up. And I said, wow, where did you learn that? She said, it's actually part of Tai Chi training. You're actually supposed to be able to fall effortlessly. And I just thought, wow, and I've never seen a Tai Chi practitioner roll. She said, yeah, we do roll. It's just,
to be fair, I haven't, although Peter will teach you to roll. Other Tai Chi classes I've been to didn't really. With ninjutsu, as you say, Bujinkan, huge. You do it at the start of every class.
Yeah.
And a couple of things about that. Billy Doolan actually said to me once, if you ever feel depressed, go and do a few rolls, because it'll bring you back to your childhood, and you won't be able to stay depressed. so do that. And another thing, I remember as years ago, I was going training, I was in a car with some guys. We stopped at a petrol station, and I was hungry. I went to get something to eat. So I had a bottle of water and a sandwich, one in either hand. And they had the car parked, and I was going to run back towards the car, basically, because I knew they were kind of in a rush to get off.
Yeah.
So as I ran, I just tripped over my own feet, and I would have gone head first into the pavement.
Yeah.
Only the instinct just kicked in, and I went straight into a roll. And I didn't. It wasn't a contrived thing. It was just the training just kicked in, so I just went straight into it. But the best part was I stood up with the sandwich and the bottle of water still in my hands.
And then your mates were like, "Way."
I got into the car and they said, that was a good roll. And I said, what happened? I said, I tripped up over myself, but I caught myself.
That's brilliant. Look, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. If anybody wishes to get hold of Younis, find out more about what he's doing with Cheng Hsin this July, hopefully we can spread the word and get interest out there. If anyone wants to train with Younis or get a treatment, contact him. We'll leave details below. He's been an Matsu practitioner for more than 20 years, so he knows what he's doing. And anything else we want to share with people before we go?
I'm sure I'll think of something, but I can't think of anything right now.
Okay.
All
right. So thanks so much. I'm gonna say thanks for joining us, and take care, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me, Anthony.
You're welcome.